But Jacob works, he's the head of horticulture at Mercer Botanic Gardens. So with their plant sale, they have a lot of fantastic plants available. He oversees the production of like 20,000 seasonal annuals. That is an impressive number of plants, my friend. It's amazing. And oversees the collection of all of their plants on site too, thousands of species. And I think what we saw on the field trip, he's always out looking for seeds, things to grow, and knows how to grow them. So let's welcome Jacob.
Y'all can hear me all right? Yeah. All right. Seeds of Texas, practical propagation for native plants. I follow the old saying, in order to know it, you gotta grow it. So we like to grow a lot of things from seed and stare at them every single day to learn or notice all these tiny little features. And it really helps you figure out how to take care of things. Okay, a little bit about me. I've been at Mercer 10 years. I've seen 4 different bosses, and we grow 20,000 annuals, and we grow absolutely so many different seeds, and we go out and collect seeds all the time. And we just finished one of our projects this year. We had permits for the Angelina National Forest to go collect seeds and herbarium vouchers because it hadn't been done in a long time. And we're bringing back a lot of East Texas natives and growing them and kind of learning all these propagation protocols. And we do spend a lot of time figuring out what this seed wants, because as everybody learned, there's not a lot of information out there about the seeds you want to learn. So what's kind of like the benefits of growing from seed? You know, you get the genetic diversity is amazing. Like one of the things I'll do is grow out thousands of something and be able to select out different cultivars or varieties that I like, bigger and things like that. And it really helps out with seed. You can put out a serious amount of numbers if you get the right seeds. And some of these native plants make tons and tons of seeds. And a lot of the best ways for the conservation and the restoration, they're growing a lot of things from seeds from different maternal lines, and having to keep track of so much of different maternal lines is really important for this step. And you can pick seeds that kind of adapted to better areas. Like I'll actively collect seeds that occur in wet areas, even though it's like a drought tolerant native. If I find it in a boggy area, I can kind of select for that kind of wet tolerance. So I'm actively like looking for seeds or plants in particular areas to figure out what I want. And I know a lot of people are really specific on their ecotypes. So selecting plants and collecting seeds from right here in Houston is huge. And you can do that really well with a lot of these natives. And we're going to go over little things. I'm going to teach you all about seed dormancy, the different cold stratification methods and scarifications and hard seeds, and all the little tips and tricks that I've learned throughout the years. And this is just a great picture of some seeds that no one had collected down at the San Jacinto Battleground Historical Monument, and just the excitement when I found these old seeds. All right, so growing native plants from seed isn't always easy. They have so many different requirements, and there's no information, and germination can be inconsistent, and things can take months, and there's tons of trial and error. And I just don't want y'all to give up and don't think that like it's impossible, but it's a lot of times you just got to figure out what dormancy it needs, and it just takes practice. And here's a great little one, Tillandsia baileyii. It's a really neat little ball moss that people don't give enough credit to. It's our other ball moss. And we had seeds and we couldn't figure out how to get them to grow. And we ended up hanging them over like thin silk like pantyhose underneath the mist system. And they still was drying out every day, and they kept drying out every day. We couldn't figure out. But we ended up putting them in water, sitting water in that cup just below, about a half an inch below that is nothing but water. And it kept the humidity high enough with the regular treatment to get those little tiny difficult seeds to germinate. And so here's like a really, tricky one that we'll have to write the procedures going forward for it, because this is a really neat little CPC plant. Native seeds follow patterns a lot of times. You can kind of just look at the plant's natural habitat and figure out if it's going to need a cold stratification. You can look at the soil types and be able to tell if it's going to need a scarification and things like that. But a lot of times they just need time. People are impatient and they give up quickly. And then there's always the few tricky ones we'll talk about that need fire. They do better with it, but we'll get into that. But one thing that I've learned is like, when you're out there and you're like, I need to find procedures on Liatris cymosa, and you're like, okay, there's absolutely nothing, but I can at least follow the patterns in that genus. So like, I'll look at Liatris and just kind of follow those general patterns to it. There may be absolutely zero information on that species, but I know that most asters will like these particular cold stratifications, and I'll start my backbone from there and kind of just keep track of all my notes. And then my little Sarracenia Lotus here, which I brought for one of y'all today, is one of those ones where if you just follow its little pattern, you'll get almost 100% success every time. Cold stratification, I assume everyone's done it, but if not, we're going to kind of go to the basics. We're just trying to honestly like mimic winter and its natural process and help breaking the dormancies through it. And if you unfortunately get seeds at the wrong time of the year, but you still need them to grow, you can kind of mimic winter and you still get them to sprout really easily. One thing that kind of people don't realize is that like a lot of times the seeds haven't triggered, when you get seeds, they're already in their little biological, like you have to break their dormancy. But if you pick seeds fresh, sometimes they haven't actually entered that little dormancy stage. So sometimes like you get that seed immediately implanted, you'll get that germination without it. But as soon as you let that seed dry, it's going to do its natural process and lock down and go until it meets its particular dormancy. And these were a beautiful Magnolia pyramidata. If you guys haven't seen that, it's a neat little odd disjunct magnolia here in Texas. And we're working with the Atlanta Botanic Garden to grow out some of the ones in the Jasper area. And these are our seeds. We had almost 100% success. So when you do cold stratification right, you can get an incredibly an abundant number of plants. Like this Asclepias linearis here. And we did it. We have tons and tons. I even brought a few for you guys today. But we'll kind of learn about the basics. It's that 33 to 41 temperature, keeping it moist but not too wet because then you'll rot it out. The refrigerators are great. Just have a specific box that you put all your cold dormancy seeds in so no one throws these old muddy bags away. And always avoid the freezer. I put stuff up near it and then have noticed that I had damage and things like that. So try to avoid the freezer. And you should always soak your seeds overnight before putting them into the stratification. You'll get so much better success. And some people even like re-soak them one more time when they come out of stratification to like really ensure these seeds are hydrated. That's one of the biggest things. We're really trying to get it hydrated. And you got to keep your temperatures right. Like just because you keep it in your house and your house is like 55, that's just not going to cut it. It really does need to get to these certain little biological temperatures that make it work. So there's a lot of different methods, and I have tried so many for making the particular cold stratification medias. Some people prefer heats, some people prefer sands and vermiculites and perlites, and those are all great. It's just you're growing, you have to pick which one you're comfortable with. The ones I like using water lily mud soil, and that's just something that I've learned over years. I have people that swear perlite is their bread and butter, and other people that say sand is their favorite. So it's all about picking your favorite media that works for you. Taking a nice bag, getting your media. As I say, people like it should be just moist enough that like one drop comes out of it, maybe 2 drops come out of it when you're getting that hydration right. If it's 3 or 4 or 5, you've probably got too many. But you need just a little bit. You can always add a little more moisture into that bag really carefully. A few things that I tell interns every year is I make them come and make water lily mud. I make them make cold stratification mud, and they stir it. They all have to add their own amount of water. And I tell them every time it better look like chunky peanut butter. Okay, that's my favorite consistency. And if they can't get it right, we just keep adjusting and adjusting. Some things that I've learned that'll really help you guys. You make numerous labels and put one in pencil because permanent marker doesn't last at all. If you guys have learned like making labels with markers, they just walk away. And put as much as you can on that label because you're never going to remember. You always forget no matter how you do. And the biggest thing I've learned is write the ready date on the outside of the bag in big marker. Cause I can't tell you how many times like we put the date on it, but we were like, is that the date I started it? Is that the date I'm supposed to take it out? So make it for yourself, because sometimes these seeds are in there for like three months and you forget about them. So make it easier for yourself or for someone else. So big, write it on the outside. It's the biggest thing in store, and then put them in the fridge and just forget about them. So we always talk about like when do I need to start my stratifications for things? A lot of times in October, early December. It just depends on what you're trying to grow. If you're growing some of these easier ones, you can wait till January. That only take like a month or two. But some things like trees and magnolias or some things that take longer, they're gonna take 3 months. So just get them going. It's not gonna hurt if the seeds sit in stratification a little longer. All that's gonna happen is it's gonna sprout in the bag, and then you can take it out of the bag. I can't tell you how many seeds I have in there that are like still from February that I need. If you're gonna look at this bag today and it says 12/7 was when I was supposed to plant it. So as long as the temperature's staying right and everything, you're still gonna be okay. But start thinking coming fall, like these are what I want to grow next spring. So I need to start acquiring my seeds in the fall. And a lot of times you can go out and get them yourself. And Liatris cymosa is our neat little one here that there's absolutely zero information on. And so we were asked to document every step of it from seed until it makes seed again. So we've been recording and measuring every step and taking 1 million photos of it. But in the fall, we get to go out and we go to collect seeds. This was us. We got to walk out and get different Rudbeckia scabrifolia and got to hang out and go collect seeds at work and get paid for it. It was a fantastic day. And we got to come across, there was one plant we were absolutely trying to find, was Amorpha canescens, and it had 3 lone seeds on it. We were so excited, but that's all we got. And it's a weird, obscure Amorpha. If you guys have never heard about it, there's a lot of argument that it may actually become its own new species because it's so out of place with all the other Amorphas. And this is just, right in East Texas. And then it's always helping having friends when you guys go collecting, because someone's got to pull the tree down to help you get seeds or help you find things. Because it's great to have help when you're out there. But wear orange in the fall when you're out there, I promise you. And then you usually get success. In the fall is acorn season. I usually drag everyone along. We go out and collect lots of acorns, and this was us this year. And we store them in different color bags because you'd be so surprised how quickly things all mix up. So a nice sandpost oaks, blue jacks, and blackjack oaks. And here's just a few common natives, and I have a big list for you guys at the end because I know that's what everyone's here to see, is a big list of what everything requires. So I just have a PDF that you guys are going to get to take home, or someone's going to email out. But it's good to know, like, okay, Echinacea purpurea and Rudbeckia, like just stratify all the Rudbeckia, stratify all your Echinaceas, all your Liatris, all your milkweeds. Just put them in the stratification so you're not wasting your time. There's been plenty of times I was like, I'm gonna challenge this species, like to not stratify it and to stratify it. And every single time I was like, I just wasted those seeds. I should have just stratified them in the beginning. And Clematis pitcheri was like my prime example. Like I plant it every time and they never grow. As soon as I stratify them, I get 100% success rate. So just kind of follow the patterns, and some some don't matter. Like the Eryngiums, you may get them to sprout, but if you stratify them, you'll get twice as many to sprout. And then when you're like me, your refrigerators are going to look like this with seeds packed in everywhere. And some, like you can see, like some of our Crataegus, that thing's not going to be ready till August, and we throw it in there and we'll forget about it. But we actually have our own designated refrigerators now just for stratification, and me and Zoe just can't even stay ahead. And I'll give you like some little like mistakes that kind of happen during our cold stratification. A lot of times, like let's say the perlite or some of these other ones, like they dry out in that bag, and so that's why I tend to like my water lily soil, because it's kind of holds my moisture just a little bit perfectly. But then I also got to be careful because my volunteers will sometimes make it like smooth peanut butter, but it needs to be chunky, and I'll get mold or rot. You actually notice the mold in your bag growing. It's not the end of the world. Just rinse your seeds out, rinse them off really well, put them back in new soil. It's very common that like our seeds started to look moldy, we clean them up and just put them right back. They're pretty tough little things. And like I said, it's not a big deal. If they sprout in the bag, that's perfectly fine. Rinse them out, plant them nice and carefully. And then your dormancy, like your house is not going to cut it. You definitely need a refrigerator. And then the labels, I can't reiterate how many times I beat myself up because I didn't make a better label for 3 months for the future. And some seeds, we've learned the other way, like these Elix coriaceae, it's a really neat holly. We're on like I think we're the most southwest extent of its range. And we tried cold stratification versus non-cold stratification, and neither of them mattered. And it took 6 months. That's just the way it is. And that's one of the things we're putting down on our list now is kind of making these out there for people so no one else has to ask these questions. So you got to learn the hard way sometimes. And then here's some neat ones, some of our styrax. Some of these bigger seeds, we have to use perlite. And this was one of my friends insistent. It's more like a drier plant, so he likes the perlite over the water lily soil. And then it's kind of better because like some of these radicals on some of these guys will just dry out really easy or break really easy in those hard muds versus the perlite's nice and soft and things like that. And deciding when to pull these out is something that we've learned the hard way as well. Pulling a seed out just because it's germinating like that doesn't mean it's ready to come out of the stratification. If that little radical is too small and you pull that out, that radical will die immediately, and then you're wasted. You have these little cotyledons that want to grow, but they have no radical to get down. So we tend to let that radical get, maybe a quarter inch. It just kind of depends on the species, but like that radical is strong enough to actually penetrate the soil, and you got to keep it humid enough because if you pull that out and break that little radical, you're going to have a sad few months. Scarification is one that takes process, takes time, and once you kind of figure out the bare bones, you can take care of it. And it's just mainly trying to like mimic the natural weathering of the seed in nature, rolling around on the rocks, getting eaten by birds, getting burned in fires, just kind of just taking a lot of abuse. And these are tough seed coats, and it can take a year or more for some of those seed coats to naturally kind of get through the scarification. And we're just kind of like trying to speed that process up, trying to get water in these. A lot of times like, we'll scarify, put it in water, and I'll realize like I did absolutely nothing. And I got to scarify way harder. And there's plenty of times people scarify too much. You can see like these are some embryos where like they got through just probably a little too farther than I'd like, but it's just to show you like the scarification process to get through to kind of show that transition color. White is probably too much, light brown is probably better. And I'll give you some little scarification methods that people use. We use like 80 grit sandpaper. That's like my favorite thing. We do it all the time. And usually we trade off, like volunteer will work on it, their hands will start cramping, we move, someone else does it. And they just keep scratching, someone else does it. And then when we have to do like bluebonnets, we got to grow like 500 of them or 1,000 of them. We have like a old watch box or a little tin can from Christmas, and we line the whole thing in sandpaper, and we throw marbles, and we put like old rusty screws in there, and they just shake it like maracas until they're annoyed, and then they have to like pass it on, and someone else shakes. And then we dump the seeds in our water. We see which ones kind of swell up, and then whatever's not swelling, they go back in, and they just keep shaking. And we just repeat the process for about a month in the fall, so we get all our bluebonnets, because we have to get so many planted. Some people like nail clippers. I'm a little hesitant because I've gone too far and I've cut my little seed and I hurt my embryo too much. So that's one. I think it just depends on how sensitive you are. I know for like really, really tricky seeds or really, really tough seeds, people can do it. I rarely ever use a knife because I don't want to cut myself with these. But a lot of times you can pre-soak the seed to kind of get it softer to make your scarification easier. And hot water is one that we use a lot of times. A lot of these seeds that get scarification are pretty tough. I like to use the coffee pot water. It's hot, it's not too hot, it's just perfect, it's really easy to use. And we'll fill that pot, pour it right on the seeds, and then let them sit it almost overnight. Everything is soaked overnight. I can't think of any times I'm soaking less than overnight. There's plenty of times I'm soaking 24 hours or longer, but I may clean that water in between. That's kind of a big thing. And some things like they'll do fine at their our room temperature. It doesn't always need warm water, but room temperature is fine for the most part. But one of the things that people kind of don't realize is the quality of your water matters so much on seeds. Like if you don't want to drink that water, don't soak your seeds in it. They don't want to be soaked in it either. We use rainwater all the time. We collect it. We use well water, or I use drinking bottled water. You don't need a lot. The seed only has to be like, cover double its width. So it doesn't take a lot of water to add to it, but using really good water really does make a difference. And we've noticed it on seeds, and we did a whole bunch with cacti seeds, and we would tell like immediately, like the ones soaked in the city water grew less than the ones soaked in, bottled water or rainwater. It was kind of scary that like that's the water we're drinking. Chemical scarification is a trickier one. You're getting kind of a little up there, or you're having like very specific species whenever I use chemical scarification. There's only a few plants that I actively will use it on, and mainly I'm trying to mimic like some sort of bird digestion is almost always when I need my acid scarification. And then some of the other like trees that are covered in a lot of resins. So like we had a lot of, we were asked to grow the old baldy in San Antonio. If anyone's ever seen it on the Riverwalk, it's one of their famous trees. And no one could get the seeds to sprout. So they gave us some seeds. They asked us to give it a shot. And so we learned that like the seed coat, kind of like the natural resins protect it until it wants to sprout. So we would use like a mild bleach solution. It would eat away that resin just enough, and then the seeds would sprout really, really well, or we'd be able to put them into our cold stratification after. And it was like night and day difference once we soaked them in the bleach solution. I have like a standard ratio I use for like a lot of things is my 1:9, like 1 part acid or bleach to 9 parts water. Those are kind of my go-to for anything is my 1:9. But if you make it stronger, you just have to minimize the amount of time it's in there. I've absolutely killed seeds by leaving them in the acid way too long because I was like, I'll get it immediately, and then I left work early, and then it was just a weird goo mess when I got back later in the morning. A lot of times, I use sulfuric acid, and what's funny is like Amazon will mail you a bottle of sulfuric acid. It's kind of scary that they'll do that. And just follow your procedure, be careful. You can try vinegars and all that, but I've never had anything. It's taxodiums, xanthoxylums are my other main ones that I'm having to use in acid scarification to kind of think about it. So if you're having trouble, see if a bird is its natural distributor, and that'll kind of begin your process of maybe I need to try acid scarification. There's some seeds that need fire to burn, need fire to sprout. And longleaf pines are ones that we've had a few sprout before, but they do so much better when you burn their media. It's night and day difference. And then we had a whole set of like acacia groups that we were trying to sprout, and we used liquid smoke was suggested, and it actually worked pretty well for the acacias. There's a couple simple methods you can try for your to get your longleaf pines to sprout. A simple one we'll do is like we'll put our media in a tray, preferably metal, put a bunch of pine needles on it, and just let it kind of start on fire. Let it burn out, let it do its thing, just let it be, and then just let it naturally sprout from there. That's one of the easier methods we use, or you can try some of the liquid smokes. And some people will just have the tray around a smoldering fire, but the other two methods we've had are much easier, and we only have a limited amount of time. No, if I don't have the opportunity to light it on fire, I will just do liquid smoke. It's one or the other, because some people don't want to light a fire on their seeds. And so here's like an easier alternative that you may get moderate success, but it will help. It showed an improvement on our acacias when we soaked them in a 1:9 ratio of liquid smoke for overnight. So the fires are more fun, but it's not always the safest. So a few things that we've learned over the years is like some seeds just absolutely won't sprout without heat. Some people's like the air temperature is warm outside, like why is my seed still not sprouting? It's just not gonna get it. If you have it on a table, there's too much airflow. It's just the soil's not getting warm enough. And the best one is a Cordia boissieri, our Texas olive. That's one that like needs at least 80, if not 90 degrees to really get it to pop. And so those are ones that like you're not going to get them to sprout unless it's like middle of summer or unless you're using heating mats. And so if we have to have plants ready by April, I'm having to use heating mats all through the winter months to really get my soil hot enough. And just like a double-edged sword, like there's absolutely too hot. You can just toast your little soil like a little oven brick if you have that thing too high. They have regulators for a reason, and we've learned not to mess with them. But you know, a lot of times, like you can tell, like if it's going to need heat, it's usually like a very active summer plant. You know, like some of the passifloras and the cacti, you can tell they benefit from the bottom heat. And a lot of our water plants, like it's the same way. We'll actually put our water plants on the heating mat so I can get my water warmer earlier in the season to kind of get those to kind of push through too. We use like horticultural grade ones. I don't think there's really any difference. A lot of times I think those reptile ones may be better. Ours tend to have like shorts and you get a little electrocuted if the floor is a little too wet. So I'm a little hesitant on our professional grade ones, but a lot of times you can measure this temperature of the soil too. Is kind of what you should be doing if you're using any heating mat. And then these are like different cacti to kind of show you like these are ones that need warmth, and you can get all this great little abundance of these guys if you just have the right warmth in soil. Just a few list of some species that like scarification, and you can tell like almost all of these are legumes or have a hard seed. And you can usually tell like if you can't crush the seed with your finger, like then it's probably gonna need some scarification on it. And you know, a lot of times there's just not literature out, and so you're gonna have to figure out yourself like, should I give it a scarify, should I not? A neat one that we're working on coming up is this Lupinus perennis is like one of our other lupins in East Texas that we're trying to get seeds this year, and we're going to grow out. We're going to have to follow all the particular procedures, but we were lucky to get to see this in the big thicket last weekend. So if maybe y'all will get to see it this coming up. Well, in May it may be too late, but that's an incredible one if you ever get a chance. So little things I've learned over the years with my scarification. If you don't scratch it enough, it won't penetrate. And I have a great seed up here for you guys to mess with. That's rock hard. That'll show you that that it didn't damage enough, and that's why it didn't work. And then too much kills the seed. So one thing I had to really relay to people: when you're scratching a seed, don't scratch it on the edges. You scratch it on the sides. You scratch it on the edge, you're just going to tear into those cotyledons. You may tear into some of those gentle shoots you see. So it just is so much better to not scratch ever on the sides if you can. It's easier, you want to, because you got something to hold on to. But if you can avoid it, scratch on the sides, the flat sides of the seeds. You can see in this picture is like a perfect example of they scratched too far and they kind of got into the embryo, and that's flat. So like that seed's most likely going to rot and die before it ever happens. And then the seeds almost always double in size after a scarification soak. That's one of my biggest things. Like, did it work? Yes, it doubled in size. All right, I'm going to have success. Let's get to plant it as well. And a lot of times they smell. Has anyone soaked some seeds too long and they swell up and they get this nasty smell to them? That means like, okay, like I've actually penetrated my seed coat. I'm getting into my seeds. And then it's often that people will let them dry out after they after they go through all this hard work and they planted them, and that little pot dries out too many times. So just be gentle, and it just takes practice. And if you get tired, just set it aside and come back later, or start soaking it to make your life easier. We've used grinders for sure, and it worked great. And then 1 second it was gone. So it just depends how good you are. And then I kind of follow a rule you'll see is like you plant a seed like twice the width. And sometimes scarification isn't always enough. You come to these like, super tricky species that have double dormancies and triple dormancies, and they have to be acid scarified, and then they have to be cold stratified, and then they have to be warm stratified. And so it's a long process. So like not every seed's really easy. Like one I'm always working on is Anthoxylum, and that's one of the trickiest seeds there is to sprout. And you gotta follow these procedures or you're just not gonna get success. So you gotta like do diligence, look up your research, find little sheets that have it and keep track of it. So what some people don't realize sometimes that some seeds actually need sunlight to germinate. Everyone thinks that like I just bury my seed and it's gonna sprout. But sometimes those light is actually what triggers the seed. A lot of times the small seeds need light to germinate. So if the seed is a tiny seed, it only needs to be like barely into the soil. Think about like twice the width of that seed is how deep it needs to be. And actually like day length can matter on certain tricky species. We actually had learned this one the hard way. We were like kept trying to grow our Thalictricum texanum and we couldn't get it to sprout. But when we changed our light pipe cycles to keep it on the short day lengths, they'll sprout every time. And so like no matter what, it didn't matter. You went through all the cold stratifications and seeded it perfectly, but it was all about that actual day length time. And there's actually not enough information or people keeping track of which seeds need short day length versus ones that need long day length. So that was one that we had just recently figured out. And then there's always like a list of seeds, but I kind of follow the like if it's a small seed, I'm gonna barely put it in the soil or I'm gonna give it a dusting and things like that. Keep it light. And then there's always our opposite end of the spectrum of some that need complete darkness, like legumes and things like that. If that's a bigger seed, you're going to keep it under the soil to make sure it actually pushes its way out. Because a lot of times on these bigger seeds, like that light will never sprout unless there's light on. If it's getting light, it just happens the way. That's always the way it is. And so just kind of keep that rule in the back of your head. The depth should be about twice the width of the seed. There's always exceptions to every rule, but that's our always beginning to everything. And then communal planting, it's actually like a really interesting topic, and it really does well with a lot of plants. There's so many times we seeded out all these beautiful trays and put one seed in every single cell and did 300 cells and not a single one sprouted. And then the pot, I just threw 300 seeds in the corner, every single one of them sprouted. And a lot of times one seed will trigger the next seed to sprout, and then they'll trigger the next seed to sprout. And so all of a sudden, they're all sprouting each other, and the communal pots do really well. And there's certain species that absolutely need communal planting, and we know that. And we're just like, okay, we always plant these communally, and I'll divide them later. It's a great backup. More often than not, we're planting communally and dividing rather than planting individually little cells, unless I know for a fact that like these will always sprout. I can seed them all in cells. And if anyone's ever gone down kin recognition with seed germination, it's a crazy, incredible topic that they took seeds from like 2 different areas, and the seeds were actually able to know that they were not related with each other, and they competed for nutrients. And the seeds taken from the same plants shared nutrients and grew all together. It was a crazy phenomenon that plants were actually able of kin recognition from seed germination. It blew my mind that they'll work together if they think they're family. So. And then recalcitrant seeds are, our big seeds. I'll take you some things I've learned over the years of oaks and magnolias and carrias. And if everybody loves pawpaws, these are things you got to do. These are seeds that you can't store. We can't put them in seed banks. We can only store them as living collections. And so we have to do something with the seeds. So a lot of times we'll collect seeds of recalcitrant seeds and we just put them in moss and we just let them sit in the fridge until they're ready. And they can sit for months. I kept oak acorns almost a year in the fridge, as long as I kept them in my slightly damp moss. They sit in the fridge, they'll stay slow, and they won't go bad. Like the very worst that happens is they'll sprout, and then I can plant them. So if you're ever collecting these recalcitrant seeds, store them in a a bag with nice moss, clean moss, and just forget about them. And when you're ready to plant them, you have them there and they're stored and ready to go. These are just some examples of kind of what it should look like on your recalcitrant bags. It's just standard sphagnum, lots of labels, 2 different labels on them. You wouldn't believe how mixed up things can get. And then here's some kind of other examples, like we'll use like these peat bags and fill them up with soil. Like some people like the sphagnum, some people like the peat. It kind of just depends on what you're going for. And if you're the sphagnum doesn't really mold or rot as easily as the soil does. So that can be, if I know it's going to be long-term storage, I'll go sphagnum. If I know I'm going to be planting it in the next month or so, I'll use peat. You can see it'll just sprout right there in a bag, and you get great success. And so, like some other examples of when we can't store seeds, we just communally plant them all, and you sometimes get these beautiful variegated seedlings will come up when you grow like 500 of something. We have these gorgeous variegated red bays coming up, but I'm almost positive like they'll all die. They'll just won't have enough chlorophyll. They'll die, but I'll try. I'll have a tray of all these beautiful variegated ones. And I'm gonna see if we can get one because they're gorgeous right now. Some ones that I've learned, some tricky ones. Some people want to grow black walnuts, nobody ever sells them, or they have Osage oranges, nobody ever sells them. And so here's one things I've learned from other people. You can just take these seeds. You don't have to do anything to them. You can just take them as is, and you put them in a bucket, throw some rainwater in there, and throw them somewhere, and just leave them until people start complaining about them, and they smell or critters are getting into them. Like that's how I know like the process is right. These are imagine sitting outside, like rotting, breaking down all the outside stuff. Because if you try to get into some of these seeds and try to pick out these seeds and clean these seeds, it's a horrible mess. Just let nature do it. I just leave that bucket, and you can see this bucket's been sitting for months, and we'll dump them out and then communally plant them, and we'll usually have great success. But just, you just got to kind of mimic some of the natural processes, and ours is that gross rotting process. And then containers, it does matter like what you put your stuff in. This is just a nice example of magnolias. Sometimes people will sprout them in these deep tree pots. Our oaks will sprout them in these deep tree pots, and all those kind of, friends of carrias and hickories, and they all need those deep tree pots. And what happens if you don't put it in that nice pot, that deep tree pot, that taproot will come down, it'll hit that bottom of the pot and it'll just die. It'll just sit there, rot. The table's extra wet. That's where disease is going to come in faster. And so you can lose it really well, and you can really get a deformed tree very quickly if you don't have it in the right pot or you're not ahead of the right container. So like just think about what your plant's going to go in when you have the opportunity to plant it. And then on the opposite spectrum, sometimes we need shallower containers with extra fast drainage because that plant is always dampening off. And so sometimes we use like really little ones, like for our cacti or some of our smaller seeds. I want it to get a little dry in between each water, and so I'll put them in a smaller, tinier container. So figuring out the right container for your species is something, but just kind of look if you can kind of tell a lot of times, like, is this a drought tolerant plant or is this a berry plant? If I should figure out the right container for it. And then here's where like the milkweeds, we've learned like they want to be in these deep cell pots, these 6-inch deep pots for them to actually be happy. They'll grow, but they don't ever thrive like they could because their roots will just be wrapped around the bottom. Cleaning your containers is pretty important. It's just, I don't need to reiterate it, but if you're doing sensitive seeds, just get all the dirt remains off. If you don't sterilize it, that's not the end of the world, but make sure there's no little dirt particles. That's the biggest thing, is those little tiny dirt particle still in that pot can make a big difference. Some people soak them in bleach. It's kind of personal preference. I'll tell you at Mercer, we almost never clean any pots, and we get great success, but we are specific as that we have like a small tray of brand new pots never used for a very sensitive species. So that's one thing, but just getting those little particles off really does make a huge difference. Their medias, guys, picking the right one. I always tell people like my seeds like to sprout in a fluffy pillow cloud. They don't want to be in this hard soil. I know people are like, but it's a native seed, it should grow in the native soil, but getting it will eventually, but we got to get those little seeds to sprout. So I prefer like a peat-based mix with a little bit of perlite, that it just feels like something that you would want to sit on. It's this soft little fluffy media. We try to use new media whenever we do seeds. We don't ever reuse media for those, and just make sure it's not too wet. They sell like germination mix. We don't buy any of it. I don't like it at all. It stays way too wet. But so think about it. If your seeds like, if it's not a fluffy, it doesn't seem fluffy and soft to you, like, okay, maybe I should try something else. And never pack your containers. I catch volunteers sometimes, they'll push the soil in the pot. It just, no, like set it in there, like it fell in nice and soft and fluffy. These are little babies. We want to make sure they live on a pillow. And you have to adjust your medias to the particular plant you're growing. Sometimes I have to add more perlite to kind of make it drain better. It just depends on what I'm trying to grow. I brought some like little examples up here of other perlites and kind of sands and granite gravels and vermiculites and all that kind of little things that people use to mix in your soils. I know people that are like, I don't use peat. I want to be peat free. I do too. I'd love to, but I can't find anything that will do the same germination success with peat. I know people say cocoa is an option, but your pH is totally off and you got to add other things. So I'm all for it if we can find an alternative, but I haven't been able to. And some people like, I have people that prefer pine bark fines as their germination mix. And that's totally fine, but you just better be able to water every single day. It's going to dry out super, super fast. That's going to be the big thing. And one thing I've learned from other growers, if you ever grow seeds and you get this like cakey look at the top where your seeds crackling and all this stuff, if you add a little tiny vermiculite when you plant, at the very end, you sprinkle a little vermiculite, it prevents that caking from happening. And I think you can see here is like my cactus are slow sometimes, it's a little cake, and you like these little cells are notorious for that caking. And so just use a little vermiculite on top. I don't like vermiculite all the time, but for this instance, when I'm getting caking process, or sometimes I need to keep it hydrated at the top level of the soil, I'll use the vermiculite because that bottom pot's going to stay wet, but that little tiny top's going to keep drying out. So that's where like this little amendment comes in. And we were growing some little native barrel cactus here. And then water regularly. We did all this hard work, we planted all our seeds, we put them on these trays, and now we got to keep our consistency. So like this first water is like the most important water to life. You spend all this time, I see people like they give it just a little tiny bit on their first water. Like I mean drench it. I soak these seeds so much that first day, and then these first couple days I keep them really, really saturated. And if I have certain species, I even put them in little saucers to let them stay wet the whole time. But you got to get them out of those saucers after a couple days. It's just for the first few days to really get them going. And this was a neat little setup that Atlanta Botanic Garden used to keep all their seeds keep all their seeds moist. And then there's things that we've learned over the years are like, I can't get these things to sprout, so I got to try something to do it. So we'll take these seeds, and I know there's like a rainstorm coming Saturday. You best believe I'm going to roll out a cart of seeds and let that natural rain just fill them up. Sometimes I swear like the minerals in the rain or just something about the rain will make these things sprout. They've been tired of getting my same city water to try to get them to sprout. Let's change it up and just let the rain just dump on them. And it really does. We get some odd germination of stuff after we do that. It's rarely is it small stuff, but we usually get at least a little bit. So change it up a little bit if you haven't good success. Humidity matters tremendously if you're trying to grow seeds. I try to keep everything around 90 to 100% during its original germination. And the humidity domes, it could be anything you guys want to use. We use fish tanks flipped side down, trash bags. I mean, you name it. It's really just kind of up to you of how you can do it. And then once your seeds really start to sprout and you see your true leaves starting to come out, I'm going to lower my humidity to like 70 to 80, and then go 60s to 50. And I'm going to slowly kind of work my way down. And some of their bags will stay sealed for months. And here's kind of like our mist system here at Mercer. It's kind of a tent system, kind of goes off. That's how I keep my humidity high. And if you don't have all the system, just a simple 1 gallon bag with your seeds, blow it up with air. That's the biggest thing. Like fill it up with air, blow it up like a little bag. and then it'll slowly lose air, and we blow it back up as often as we can. But that humidity makes a huge difference, especially if you have like, you only got a few seeds, keep it high, and then you'll slowly crack that bag and let more air in and things like that. So just depends on what you have. Like Fort Worth Botanic Garden has 80 million terrarium domes, and they grow so much stuff in these domes, and that's the way they like to keep their humidity high, is in these little domes that could stay in these for years. And even we've taken fish bowls and just covered containers really well. It's just keeping that humidity high, and these things will be happy. If you guys have never tried growing these kind of things from spore ferns, it's honestly a whole nother presentation, but I'll give you the Spark Notes quick version of it. We take a media, I like peat, Zoe likes sphagnum. We do the same thing. We get it to only a few drops come out. We pack it in our to-go containers, and we throw them in the microwave for 5 minutes. Sometimes we close the lid all the way. Sometimes the lid's cracked a hair. It kind of just depends who put it in, and you just microwave it, and it'll sterilize the media. Sometimes we do it with other sensitive seeds. If I need media sterilized, like that's my fastest, easiest way. Just microwave it in one of those containers. There's always these laying around. These were some neat woodwardia areolatus, one of our neat little ferns. And you can see the germination was incredible on those. And I have one here for you guys to look at. But like the biggest thing is after you take that thing out of the microwave, you gotta let it cool for a while. If it's too hot to touch at all, you're gonna fry your spores. So I've killed many spores by putting them in. I was too eager and I really wanted to get them in. So, and then just good water. You cannot use city water on fern spores. You just will not. You better use good water there. And like the rain is fine, it works great. You're not gonna contaminate anything, but just never letting them dry out. You'll lose like months of work. I think these are 4 months in, is what you're seeing right now. And then here's kind of when you get past that stage of my fern, I'm kind of into my actual little plantlet. And so this is almost a year, and then we got to be little plants. So it just got to have patience on ferns, but there's no one growing them is the sad part. No one's growing native ferns except for like digging them up. So if we can make them available by spore, we can make the spore process easier. We can kind of minimize people digging them up and trying to sell them. And then orchids, oh my God, it could be an entire presentation on orchid production. So if you have questions about this topic, it would be just come talk to me after. This is a orchid seed production lab going on. So everything they do is orchid production. You can see like little baby orchids growing from seed. It's incredible. You get to go see places like this, but you better have like patience. And then I'll go over a few fun guys before we finish out. Passita filiformis is a weird member of the laurel family. Think about that. So parasitic vine in the laurel family that we were able to grow. No one had much information about growing this plant, so we wanted to try to grow it. Another plant that mimics dodder but is so farly unrelated to it was interesting. And we actually had success. These are like from the beginning till we actually found some grasses that we hosted them on. So it was fun to document these all the way through their life cycle, and they're still growing now. And then one of my newest challenges is our Texas Sunnybell. If you've never seen one of these guys, they're a weird little plant that occurs kind of with our Texas Prairie Dawn. And this was another one we didn't find much information on. And so we actually got 2 little seeds to sprout. We did cold stratification and non-cold stratification. Neither of them mattered. They sprouted when they were ready, like 4 months in. That was it. And then some neat tricks that we've learned from, we got to visit Atlanta Botanic Garden, and they grow these recalcitrant seeds. They sprout them, but then they permanently will store them in these like tissue culture labs. And so like some of these acorns we collected from them in Jasper here are stored in here, and they just maintain them as living collections since we can't store those seeds. And then they even have this like fancy multi-$1,000 machine that can blow wind at the most perfect, velocity to blow the chaff away, that doesn't blow the seed away. And we're over here just hoping for the best. So it's fun to see that these machines actually exist. And then they actually like perfected the techniques of like how to properly store seeds. They'll store them outside in a normal envelope, and then when they move them to these solutions, that's like a super saturated salt solution that literally will absorb all the moisture out of that jar to like the exact perfect, the amount of humidity. So it's really cool that like they have it down on how to store seeds in the best methods there is. And then my biggest thing is make good labels here. As you can see, someone just wrote cactus sticky on the label was all it was labeled as. So please make good labels. It'll save your life in the long run. And then this is my big, beautiful list of all these natives and which ones are acid stratification and how long they got to be cold stratified, how deep you plant them, all that good stuff that I have available for you guys as a PDF that you can get mailed out or you can figure out how to get it. And you can email me too. It's just add to it. Like take this list and then just start adding species onto it. It's just a base. I want you guys to kind of work from here. I brought examples of plants up here that we grew from seed or projects, and I'm going to be around to answer any questions if you guys have anything. Thank y'all.
Thank you, dude. That was amazing. I admittedly sunk at growing seeds because I fall down somewhere and keeping them moist, keeping them consistent, but if Jacob is willing, we will open the floor for questions.
Yep.
And I have a mic, so I will come to you for questions.
When is your book coming out?
Oh, Google Sheets is my life. So, yeah. Did you have one?
Yeah, online. Susan Fortenberry asks, has the speaker used coarse vermiculite in bags for CMS?
Yeah, I have coarse vermiculite over there. It's just I don't like vermiculite for the cold stratification because you can use vermiculite to feed molds a lot. Like it's like a food source. So sometimes I think if something's a food source for fungus, I don't want to always use it as to let things grow in. I worry that I can feed the wrong fungus. So that's the reason I prefer other ones, but it's totally impossible.
Jacob, is A&M a good resource or are they mostly towards industrial?
No, they definitely are a great resource. They yeah, absolutely.
Receive propagation information.
Hey, how's it going? Two questions. First, you mentioned grouping them together when you plant them. What about stratifying a seed mix together? And then is it viable to stratify them and then go throw them out? Or will that like ruin the process if you just take them straight out of the fridge and put them in the ground?
That's totally fine. You can absolutely do that. You can put them in cold strat and then plant around the ground. Just make sure you keep it plenty moist during that time when you seed them in the ground. We'll absolutely do that with like the bluebonnets sometimes. We'll do that and then just seed them straight out. So yes, just keep your media ready, moist.
Okay, how do you keep bags, the plastic bags, and also those stones from molding? Because every time I use them, I get mold inside.
We do clean the bags very well. That's very common that the molds, and so if you don't clean that humidity dome, yeah, absolutely. So we do gotta clean them pretty well. And then there's only a lifespan of how many times I can use that bag. I'll use it maybe like 2 times, maybe 3 times, or maybe it becomes a bag for something else.
I use it often, they'll mold inside.
Oh, then you should maybe use your media. That would be like I'd be worried your media is not sterile or isn't. It's maybe you can try a more inert media. Because yes, if you use like natural soils, it'll grow all sorts of things. Yeah.
Hi, for the communal seeding, have you ever observed for plants that like in their adulthood, they seem to like separate in nature? Does the communal seeding seem to also work for that despite like?
I can't say the plants I've learned that I'd say that will like communally. Some of them you only find them growing communally, like I think of sassafras or some of the spice bushes. When I find them in the wild and the abundance of them, and they respond really well to the communal planting. But versus things real isolated, I don't know for certain on that one. One thing I will remind everyone is when you do communal planting, it should be an even layer. You shouldn't have stuff stacked on top. There should never be seeds sitting on top of other seeds. It's as flat, even layer as possible for the communal planting. But when in doubt, they like it. It really helps out the communal planting. Yet too many seeds will be your detriment. Yes. So that's what I mean. Like if I pile them on top of each other, yeah, I'll seed them to death. But yeah, and then just kind of pick a broader container. Yeah.
So in horticulture, there's like a concept of like guilds where plants interplay with each other, or have you tried mixing seeds to germinate them?
So we've tried it on a few things that like certain species need like a nursery species to kind of get them to sprout. There's not enough literature on it, but it is a thing. And there's also a thing of sometimes seeds will only sprout under like a mature tree of the same species. And so that's a thing of we'll just bury them under like a natural trying to remember what species, the Halesia dipteras. That's one where like you just pile them underneath the mature one and you'll get better germination ever than like trying to plant them in their own pot. So I think it's more there's some sort of mycorrhizal relationship going on there, but it is an absolutely a thing. The madrones, our Texas madrone is a famous one that needs kind of like a nursery tree to really do well.
I can't remember what plant it was, but when you were out looking for seeds and you found the 3 seeds that you collected. So what is the thought process and what is the future of those 3 seeds? Will you grow them, get seed sources? Will you grow them, put them back in nature? Or since there don't seem to be possibly a lot of seeds available?
So we'll try to grow those little 3 seeds for sure. I don't have a lot of faith in them, but we'll definitely try. But the whole reintroduction process as a whole, we won't try to ever do anything like that with those species. We'd be trying to grow them in our garden so that tissue is readily available for someone that wants to do more studies on it. They can just call us in a second and we can mail it to them versus like having to go collect something from that tiny little patch in the middle of nowhere. That's kind of like our end goal for growing these there.
So from online, I've heard people say they don't want to use peat, but I don't know what the controversy is. Can you please give me an idea?
I believe it's that peat is not a sustainable product, and it causes a lot of gas problems as well when we dig it up. So that's kind of there's a lot of debate on it and argument, but
it's about the harvesting process is disruptive, and I think it's in sensitive environments and it's hard to find and it's limited.
And another one, do you have a protocol for growing antelope horn milkweed from seed?
Oh, just cold stratify for 30 days and it will sprout. But like soak the seed overnight before it goes into that cold stratification. But yeah, all the milkweeds are actually really easy if you cold stratify them. There's only like one that you may not have to, but we just do it
Linearis.
But linearis, we stratified to get better success than it. So that's what we have today. We have 2 little ones off our big one, and these were collected like right here in Houston. So this was growing on a railroad high line on like Homestead and 610.
Oh yeah.
I couldn't believe it was growing. It was crazy to find it there.
Another question?
Yeah, I don't know if everybody knows, and I wanted your advice. It's now my understanding that Hercules Club can no longer be sold because it's a citrus and because of you can't cross counties. Is that correct?
Me and the Texas Department of Agriculture have a lot of different thoughts on that. I don't think that we should focus on a crop like citrus that got completely wiped out in 2021 and not grow a native plant instead and try to grow citrus again. Yes, they'll come and they'll try to say that you can't grow xanthoxylum due to citrus scab, I think is the exact one. And it has to stay in Harris County, but I just don't think that's very fair that we should give up a great host plant so people can have all their citrus die again in like 5 years, so.
So, I mean, now that we can't have them, I desperately want one. So I just wondered I mean, are you all gonna be able to have them at March Mart or supply them at your sales?
I will say they probably won't grow them at March Mart due to the whole fiasco last season, but I will say that the Texas Department of Agriculture wasn't even observant enough to notice other species in the Rutaceae family growing right there next to them that they walked right past. And so that they're enforcing things that they don't even have enough information on. Grow them yourself. There's nothing wrong with picking seeds. They grow all over Houston. You'll find them on very common under power lines where people are getting ready to go spray a bunch of herbicide on, so. I have a strong opinion on xanthoxylum, sorry.
Wasn't that one of the species that you said was hard to germinate?
It is, it's very hard to germinate, so.
Used to be when teachers were trying to do natural gardens in their schools, that it was, that we were told to do mud seed balls and then just throw them out. What is your comment about success or not?
Just pick the right species of seeds in your ball. There's nothing wrong with them. They use them, you know, you can do some blue stem grasses and things like sunflowers, like they'll do absolutely perfectly fine in a seed ball. There's nothing wrong with making seed balls of bluebonnets and putting them out. They may not sprout for a couple of years, but just please pick the right seeds. We've had to like turn away seed bombs because someone made them with like a wildflower mix from Minnesota and not right here, so. That's kind of the bigger thing, just know what you're putting in.
Yeah.
Oh, they do one in March and they'll do one in fall, like, could be October, could be November.
Do you have a diary format / checklist for your diary entries for each stage of growing seeds?
We just use Google Sheets and a seed bank and just, that's about the best way to do it. We just keep track of when they'll be sowed and maybe some of the success rate, but the volume we go through, keeping up with it is, you know, a difficult task in itself. So if anyone would like to come volunteer and help us maintain that, I would love to have that.
That's something if we're not very good at information ourselves.
Other questions?
No, great.